All right, so you want to sound more confident when you speak English. Well, we're diving deep into pronunciation today. You've given us tons of stuff, articles, tips, even a YouTube video.
Yeah, and I think it's so cool that you're focusing on this because mastering pronunciation, it's not about like erasing your accent or sounding like some native speaker, you know?
Yeah.
It's about being understood and feeling confident, like expressing yourself well.
I really like that. Yeah, it's all about communication, right? Not just mimicking some kind of accent. So where do we even begin with all this information? I mean, there's a lot here.
Well, you got to start with yourself, really. You know, figuring out what pronunciation challenges you have.
Okay, so kind of like figuring out what you need to work on.
Exactly. Yeah, like, you know, if you speak French, maybe the "douf" sound is hard because it doesn't even exist in French.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And even just English spelling can be so tricky. Prep Play talks about this a lot. They give examples like though, thought, and through. Like, how is anyone supposed to know how to say those just by looking at them?
Right. The spelling doesn't always match the sound at all. And that's where phonetics can really help.
Phonetics?
Yeah, it's basically breaking down language into sounds. Like the tiniest sounds called phones.
So phonemes are like the building blocks of how we talk.
Exactly. And when you write down the sounds, it's called phonetic transcription, which is really helpful for those tricky spellings, you know?
So instead of getting confused by the spelling, you can just focus on the sound.
Right. Some sources even mention the International Phonetic Alphabet, or IPA.
IPA?
Yeah, it's like symbols for all the sounds humans make.
Oh yeah, I've seen those symbols before. They look a little intimidating though. Do I need to become an expert in the IPA to get better at pronunciation?
Not at all. Just knowing the basics can help you, you know? Like the symbol, that's for the they in think. And A is the in this. So if you can see it, it can help you hear it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. It's like a secret code for pronunciation.
It is kind of like a code. And another thing that can really help is just listening, you know? Bold voice and pre-ply both talk about this. Immersing yourself in English.
So listening to like podcasts, audiobooks, movies, things like that.
Yeah, all of that. It's like training your ears to hear the little differences.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And English recommends something called shadowing. Have you heard of that?
Oh, yeah. Basically, you just mimic a native speaker. It's like you're their shadow.
That sounds interesting. I wonder if it's hard to do.
It can be a little strange at first, but it really works. You're training your mouth to make the sounds, and you start to feel the rhythm, you know, the intonation.
Wow, I'm definitely going to try that. And speaking of trying things, a lot of these sources talk about tongue twisters.
Yeah, tongue twisters are fun, and they help you practice certain sounds, you know, like they exercise your mouth muscle.
Oh, I love tongue twisters. Never thought of them that way, though. Like a workout. And ETJ English talks about stress, too, rhythm and timing. They say it's really important to sound confident and to be understood. So it's not just about saying the words correctly, but also about how you say them.
Exactly. They even talk about flat delivery versus what they call an emotive tone, you know?
So like putting some feeling into it?
Yeah, exactly. And they also say to slow down. It might seem weird, but confident speakers don't rush. They take their time.
Oh, that's a good reminder. I definitely rush sometimes, especially when I'm nervous.
It happens. And they also mention pauses, you know, pausing to breathe and to think.
Yeah, taking a break can really help. And, you know, speaking of taking it easy, a lot of these sources say that it's okay to make mistakes. Bold Voice even says to laugh at yourself.
It's so true. It's all about getting better, not being perfect.
Yeah.
Even native speakers make mistakes.
Oh, that's good to hear. So just jump in and start speaking, even if I mess up sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Be patient with yourself. And practice, practice, practice. And that means talking, you know. Reply, Bold Voice, and English Path, they all say to find a partner, a native speaker, or even talk to yourself.
So just getting out there and using the language.
Exactly. But ETJ English also cautions against trying to fix every little thing at once. They say to pick one or two things and focus on those.
So like breaking it down into smaller pieces.
Yeah. You'll feel more confident as you go.
This is great. We've already learned so much, like understanding sounds, being okay with mistakes, and finding your own rhythm.
We've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore. But I think we've got a good foundation now. We can dive into some more specifics in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to keep talking about pronunciation. I'm really excited about this. We already covered so much in the first part.
Yeah, we did. We talked about like the importance of practice, right? Well, English Path suggests watching movies and TV shows. It's a fun way to kind of absorb different accents and pronunciation styles, you know?
Oh, that's a good idea. I've definitely noticed I pick up new words and phrases when I watch shows in other languages.
Right. And it's not just about listening either. Pay attention to how native speakers move their mouths. Bold Voice talks about this a lot, like your tongue, your lips, even your jaw. They all work together to make those sounds.
Wow, so it's like a whole body experience.
It really is. For example, where you put your tongue for the AA sound, like in father, versus the AH sound, like in cat, it can make a huge difference.
I had never really thought about it like that. So we're kind of training our mouths to make these new shapes.
Exactly. And Bold Voice even says to exaggerate those movements at first, like you're an actor warming up. It might feel silly, but it helps your muscles learn those positions.
I like that. So it's like a workout for our tongues. Speaking of tricky sounds, Bold Voice also talks about something called flapped T's and D's.
Oh yeah, that one's interesting. So in American English, when T or D comes between vowels, it often gets softer. Like the word water might sound more like water, and better might sound like better.
Wow, that is subtle. I can see how that would be hard to catch.
It's a small thing, but it can make you sound more natural. And don't forget about those English spelling rules. They can be a real pain. Bold Voice talks about this too. Yes, silent letters and vowels that sound different depending on what's around them.
I know, English spelling can be so confusing.
It really can. But luckily we have online dictionaries. Bold Voice and Preply both talk about how useful they are. You can hear the correct pronunciation and see the phonetic transcription.
It's like having a pronunciation coach right in your pocket. I use online dictionaries all the time, especially for new words.
They're super helpful. But even if you can pronounce every word perfectly, you still have to put them all together in a sentence. And that's where stress comes back in. But this time it's sentence stress.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about stressing the right syllables in a word, but also stressing the right words in a sentence.
Exactly. ETJ English explains that it's super important for getting your meaning across and for sounding confident. They also talk about thought groups, which is like how we naturally group words together when we speak.
It's amazing how words kind of blend together when we talk naturally. It's almost like music. English actually talks about this. It's called connected speech, like how words flow smoothly from one to the next.
Yeah. And they say that a lot of little words like a, an, and the, they have like two pronunciations, a stressed one and an unstressed one mastering that can really make you sound more natural.
So it's like there are two sets of rules, one for single words and one for how those words work together in a sentence.
That's a great way to put it. It shows how complex spoken English really is. We've covered so many techniques already, like listening, shadowing, tongue twisters, working on individual sounds, understanding stress and rhythm.
Yeah.
It's almost too much. Where do we even start? Well, remember what ETJ English said. Don't try to fix everything at once. Pick one or two things that you really want to work on and focus on those.
That's good advice. I get overwhelmed easily. It's a journey, right? We don't have to be perfect overnight. But how do we even know if we're making progress? How can we tell if we're getting better?
That's a great question. One of the best ways is to record yourself speaking English and then listen back and compare it to a native speaker. Bold Voice, Preply, and English all recommend this.
So it's like hearing yourself with new ears, like really paying attention to what I sound like.
Exactly. And then you can spot those little things that need work. And don't be shy about asking for feedback too. English Path talks about this a lot, like getting help from an expert, a teacher, or a tutor, someone who can help you see those pronunciation issues that you might not even realize you have.
That makes sense. It's like having a pronunciation coach, right? Someone to give you personalized advice. But even with all the best techniques and resources, it's still going to be hard sometimes, right? There are going to be days when I just feel frustrated.
Oh, definitely. Learning something new is always tough. But remember what Bold Voice says. Don't be afraid to laugh at yourself. Mistakes are normal. It's how we learn. The important thing is to keep practicing and stay motivated.
That's a good point. It's about enjoying the process too, right? Preply and English Path also suggest finding a language partner or joining an English-speaking group. Having people to practice with and support you.
It's so helpful to have that community. And remember to make pronunciation practice a habit. Like English suggests connecting it to something you already do, like practice tongue twisters after you brush your teeth, or listen to a podcast on your way to work.
That's a great idea, making it part of my routine. This has been so fascinating. We've talked about so much, like specific techniques, the nuances of connected speech, and even the power of laughter.
Yeah, it's been a lot. We've talked about resources, the importance of self-awareness, focused practice, and not being afraid of making mistakes.
And we're not done yet. There's still more to learn. In the last part of this deep dive, we're going to bring it all together and give you some concrete steps to take your pronunciation to the next level. So stay tuned. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into pronunciation. It's amazing how much there is to learn, from like the tiny sounds to tongue twisters and everything in between.
That's true. And I think the most important thing to remember is that there's no one right way to do it, you know?
Yeah.
You have to find what works best for you.
So how do we take all of this information and actually use it to improve? Like, where do we start?
Well, I think it goes back to those individual challenges we were talking
All right.
about, you know? Like figuring out what your specific weaknesses are.
Right, like maybe I have trouble with L's and R's, or I blend words together too much.
Yeah, exactly. A good way to start is to record yourself reading something and then listen back and really pay attention. What sounds are tricky for you? Which words do you stress differently than a native speaker?
So it's like listening to yourself with fresh ears.
Exactly. And once you know what you need to work on, you can practice those things specifically.
Right.
Like if L's and R's are tough, find some tongue twisters that use those sounds.
That's a good idea, like a targeted workout for your tongue.
And if sentence stress is a challenge, try reading out loud and exaggerating the stress on the important words.
Yeah.
You'll start to feel how that changes the meaning.
Oh, that's interesting. I can see how that would make my speech more dynamic. And what about that shadowing technique we talked about? I think that would be good for practicing stress and intonation too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Find a clip of someone speaking, maybe from a movie or a podcast,
Right.
and try to mimic everything. The sounds, the intonation, even the pauses.
Like becoming a pronunciation detective. It sounds like fun. And remember, even a little bit of practice every day can make a big difference.
Consistency is key. It's like working out. You got to keep at it. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins along the way.
Yes. Like when you finally master that one sound that's been giving you trouble. It's a great feeling.
Exactly. And as you get better, don't be afraid to challenge yourself even more. Like maybe record a video of yourself speaking and share it with a friend or a language partner to get feedback.
That's a good idea. I'd be a little nervous to do that, but I think it would be really helpful.
It definitely can be. And remember, this is a journey. There are going to be times when you feel frustrated, but just keep coming back to those resources and those techniques. And remember that community we talked about. Having people to support you can make a big difference.
It's so true. It's about embracing the whole process, right? The ups and downs.
Yeah, exactly. Enjoy the ride.
Mm.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious, what's one thing you're going to focus on first to improve your pronunciation?
That's a great question. There are so many possibilities. Maybe it's mastering a specific sound or practicing shadowing. Or maybe it's just recording yourself and noticing those little errors you make. What about you? What are you going to focus on?
That's a tough one. I think for me, I'm going to try incorporating more shadowing into my routine. It just seems like such a powerful technique, you know? And I'm also going to make a conscious effort to slow down when I speak. I tend to rush sometimes, especially when I'm excited.
Those are great goals. I'm going to focus on tongue twisters. I love them, and I think they're a fun way to practice. Plus, I need to work on those L's and R's anyway.
Sounds like a plan. And remember, it's all about finding your own voice. A voice that is clear, confident, and uniquely you.
Well, I think that's about it for our deep dive into pronunciation. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you, and I hope you've learned some valuable tips and tricks along the way.
Me too. This has been such a fascinating journey, and I'm so grateful for all the amazing resources that are out there to help us on our pronunciation journey. So to everyone listening, keep practicing, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep having fun with it. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of language learning.